Hello, and welcome to Word on the Reef, a podcast where we take the plunge into one of the world's most spectacular natural wonders, the Great Barrier Reef. Today, we're heading to Raine Island, a tiny sand cay less than 1 kilometre long near the remote far northern tip of Queensland, a 3-day boat journey north of Cairns. Now, looking at our destination, this tiny island might not look like much, and it's exuding a rather strong smell of bird droppings. But Raine Island shot to international fame in 2020 due to viral footage of tens of thousands of sea turtles flocking to the island to lay their eggs. It was the largest turtle aggregation ever caught on camera and was captured by Richard Fitzpatrick, an Emmy-winning cinematographer and adjunct research fellow specialising in marine biology at James Cook University in Cairns. Richard grew up on the reef, took a shark to school for show and tell as a kid, and has spent his life in the water studying and filming every critter imaginable. He's wrestled sharks, swum with aggressive giant squid, survived being stung by deadly jellyfish, had his first case of diving bends before he even turned 18, and is somehow still here to tell every single tale. I'm looking forward to exploring more of his adventures in future episodes. But today, we're going to be talking about one of the most beloved and famous animals on the Great Barrier Reef, the sea turtle. Raine Island supports the world's largest remaining nesting population for the internationally endangered green sea turtle. Each year, as many as 100,000 female green turtles migrate thousands of kilometres to lay their eggs on the island. But this island and its turtle population are in trouble. So to find out more about it, we're here with Richard. The island is so protected that nobody except researchers, traditional owners, and restoration workers are allowed to set foot on it. So today we're going to view it from our sailing boat. Earlier, we went snorkeling on a reef nearby, and even though I've snorkeled with thousands of turtles, it's something I never get tired of. There is nothing quite as magical and surreal as swimming with a sea turtle. And luckily, it's something we can do easily every day here on the Great Barrier Reef, where they have been protected since 1999. Green sea turtles can reach up to 5 feet or 1.5 metres in length and weigh up to 395 kilograms or 870 pounds. But they are gentle giants, feeding on seagrass and jellyfish. And after more than 100 million years swimming in our oceans, they are living dinosaurs. Despite their name, green sea turtles are actually mottled brown in colour, which helps them to camouflage on the sea floor. Unless threatened, they move with a slow grace, unafraid of anything, and that's what makes them so majestic. When you see a turtle, it's important to give it space, never touch it, and don't block its access to the surface when it needs to breathe. Now the sun is setting, and with the drone, we can already see the first baby turtles erupting from their nests on the beach and running the gauntlet of predatory birds down to the water, where they must dodge sharks to make their way out to the relative safety of the open ocean. Before we start our chat today, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the sea country and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Raine Island is a highly significant cultural place, and part of the sea country belonging to the Wuthathi people from Cape York and the Meriam Nation people from the eastern Torres Strait Islands, Ugar, Mer and Arab. Hello Richard, lovely to be here with you at Raine Island today. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
I'm a marine biologist. I specialise in sharks and also a natural history cinematographer. So I've shot over 150 documentaries, a lot of them about the Great Barrier Reef and the unique things we have here. And Raine Island has been an area I've been working in now for 20 years or so. Last time I added it up, I think I've spent about 4 years of my life actually on the island.
For those listeners who can't see, can you please describe Raine Island?
Okay, Raine Island is a sand cay. It's about 800 metres long, 300 metres wide. In the middle of the island is a raised area, and that's where you get a lot of the birds around at the moment. And it was also the area that was mined for guano at the turn of the century. And if you look at the far end, you'll see the tower, which it's pretty famous for. So the Raine Island Tower, it was never a lighthouse, it was a visual beacon. So when the sailors were coming up the coast, they could use that as a landmark to know where the end of the reef was still to come further north. So it has major historical importance for Australian history, has a lot of importance for the traditional owners. Their connection to the island dates back thousands and thousands of years. And for nature, we have animals coming from tens of thousands of kilometres away in terms of bird migration from as far away as Siberia. It's the most significant seabird nesting site in all of Queensland. It's also the world's largest green sea turtle nesting site, and also the largest aggregation site in the world for tiger sharks, which come to feed on the green turtles when they're coming here to nest. So it's a very important place.
I've seen footage which I think is probably world famous that a lot of people might have seen from above, drone footage of thousands and thousands of turtles swimming up to Raine Island to nest. I understand you were one of the pioneers of this drone footage collection at Raine Island.
Yeah, so drones, from our filmmaking side, we've been involved with drones right from the beginning, where we literally gaffer taped the first GoPro to one of the first drones just to get that aerial view, and we've been using the technology there, and obviously a lot of the footage we've got there over the years has gone viral for the mega numbers. But the drone itself ended up becoming a major scientific tool, and so we pioneered the use of it up there to map the island, and so we could be mapping it every day to see how much sand moved from all these turtles nesting up there, looking at critical habitats before the earthworks and after. But one of the questions we always were asking is, like, we can count the number of turtles as they come up onto the beach to nest, but how many have actually migrated to the area of the island? And one of the real novel approaches we did to get an accurate count of the turtles around Raine Island was, on one night, 1,000 turtles have a white stripe painted down their back. And then during the day they go back into the water, and then we fly the drone around the whole reef, and then you count the number of turtles you can see that have no paint on them versus the striped one, and you come up with a simple ratio to then get a good estimate on the population that has migrated there. So the drones have been great both for filmmaking and for the science.
So there are baby turtles hatching on this island right now, and after they emerge from their nests in the sand, where do they go?
The turtles, once they hatch and make it past the walls of death of the Great Barrier Reef, then the hatchlings are out in the open ocean. We actually don't know where they go. It's called the lost years. But they're out in the open ocean currents, and they're feeding on plankton and jellyfish and all these kind of things. And we don't see them on the reef until they're about the size of a dinner plate. And that's where you find them around areas of mangroves. Some of the island mangrove systems you go up to, you see these little dinner plate sized animals, and they're beautiful. Some of the seagrass beds. That's what they're coming into, and that's what they're feeding on. And, for the next sort of 20, 30 years of their life. And seagrass beds, we know, are one of the best carbon sinks we have in the ocean environment. If you're talking about blue carbon and all that kind of stuff, seagrass is at the top. And so the sea turtles play an integral role in the health of a seagrass, nutrient inputs from their waste and all that kind of stuff. They're part of an important ecosystem. And then when the sea turtle's around 30 years old and she's got enough energy and she's had good seasons, because the seagrass beds are quite seasonal as well, with El Nino events and flooding events, and they're under stress as well at the moment. But if she's got enough energy, she'll make that migration back to the area where she came from, back to that island or an island close by. She could have met a male on the seagrass beds and mated and stored that sperm, or she may find a fella on the way or at the ultimate destination. And then she'll get there, and then she'll stay around those islands nesting for a couple of months. She'll come up every 20 odd days to nest, and then lay a clutch of eggs. And she can actually, the clutch of eggs could be from different males. So Steve could be the dad of this clutch. Next 20 days could be Mark or whatever. So you're getting genetic diversity happening within those eggs. In between, she'll come off and just rest around the island. You can see big numbers of them in the water and just hanging around. So because they're coming up every 20 days or so, when we're counting the number of turtles, in the water, you know that each night it's about a 20th of those that will be coming up on the beach to nest. So she'll do that for a few times. Depends on how much energy she has. She may do 2 or 3 clutches, some up to 6 or 8. The older girls do more because they're more experienced. It's interesting when you're up there and you see a young female come up, just doing circles and like not knowing what to do, on the beach. But the older females, it's beautiful to watch them nesting. They'll come up and they'll body pit, so they'll start, their big flippers at the front make an excavation, get their whole body down. And then one of the most beautiful things to watch is the dexterity of the rear flippers as they can build this egg chamber. And if the sand is too dry and it's starting to collapse on themselves, they'll stop and go find another spot. So, it can take them many, many hours to nest. But once that whole egg chamber is excavated, then, they do the egg laying process, cover them up, and then back to the front flippers to fully cover over that area and moving forward, and then off they go again. And then they'll migrate back to their feeding grounds. So an adult female, again, because it's the amount of energy, they don't come up every year, but maybe every 4 or 5 or 6 years they'll do the migration to do the nesting.
Amazing. So turtles have some pretty cool superpowers. They can navigate across hundreds or maybe even thousands of kilometres of ocean. Do we know how they do that and how far across the world they can travel?
So we don't know the exact process they do it, and it's probably a combination, to be honest. So they have magnetite in their brain, so that allows them to sense the magnetic fields of the Earth. So that'll give them a general direction to be going. It's thought that just surfacing, looking at the stars, may help them orientate as well. And as you're getting closer to a reef, obviously reefs are a very smelly thing. So then you have odor trails coming off that are unique, and then they can zero in on that. So they're probably using a suite of sensors to actually migrate, to where they came from. But, there's some turtles that will be going along and go, oh, there's an island, I'm just going to call in here and, not bother going all that way. So that does happen to a percentage of the population. For Raine Island, the tagging that's been done there since the 70s, just looking at flipper tags, as well as now we've got satellite tags, but those turtles will go all the way up to New Guinea, the Torres Straits, the Gulf region, New Caledonia, Fiji, Solomon Islands, all the way down to the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. So, you're talking thousands of kilometres of range for these sea turtles coming to this island. Why rain is still significantly important, and these islands are important, is that there would have been a lot more nesting on the mainland back in the day, but feral animals, particularly pigs and dogs, digging up these nests, meant that mainland nesting in a lot of locations essentially got wiped out, and there's none of that knowledge within the turtles to go back there because none of the eggs survived to get out there. So why these islands are really important is they're predator free. So even places like Lizard Island, you get only a little bit of nesting on because the goannas knock them. So it's tough.
Another fun fact about turtles is obviously that they breathe air, like dolphins and whales do. They have to come up to the surface, and they're a reptile. How deep are they known to dive, and how long can they hold their breath?
There have been a few tracks of them getting down to a few hundred metres, so they're pretty surprising with that. It's interesting, we did some tracking of turtles up at Raine in relation to them being out with sharks, and we found during the daytime, when they're relaxed and they're just literally hanging in the water, they're looking below them and around them, and they'll start at the surface and they'll slowly go down to like about 10 metres or so, and then go up and take a breath, probably about every 40 or 50 minutes. And it's amazing to see all these females just literally hanging in the water. I've been in the water sometimes surrounded by hundreds of them. It's just stunning. But at night time, they'll tuck in against the edge of the reef, and and we had little depth loggers on them, like a little dive computer that we retrieved, and you could see they would go straight to the bottom, like 15, 20 metres, hugging on the reef, and the depth didn't change, which meant that the turtle wasn't moving. So they're tucked in against the edge of the reef at night, staying there, and about at the 40-minute mark, zoom to the surface, take a breath, and zoom straight back down again, because it's night time, there's predators around. So their resting regime is different from day to night when we're up there. So they obviously know how to try and avoid the tigers. A recent job we did up there, we've started putting cameras on the tiger sharks to see how many interactions between turtles and tigers, and we were thinking there'd only be a handful. But our first deployment, over about a 6-hour period, there was over 30 interactions with the shark going and looking at the turtle and, trying to get from behind it, approach it. And as soon as, if it had the angle wrong and the turtle saw it, the turtle would just turn around and look at it, and the tiger would just break off and it's like, oh, nothing to see here. And, just off they go again.
So how do turtles defend themselves when they're out in the open? I guess before humans came on the scene, were sharks their only predator?
Well, back in the day, we'd had dinosaurs bring predators on
True.
them, and even some of the big vicious marine mammals that came through the evolutionary line. But the turtle's defense mechanism, because they can't pull their head and their flippers into the shell like a tortoise, the shell is still their primary defense. So what we find with the turtles is, they're very aware. They're always looking around, and if they can see a shark coming, what they'll do is they'll flip up on their side and present the top of the turtle to the shark. So it's a massive thing for a shark to try and get its mouth around. And I've seen quite a few predation events, and I've seen turtles outmaneuver tiger sharks and that kind of stuff. So I think the success rate of a tiger hitting a live turtle is not that great. They have to put a lot of effort into it. And I saw one turtle, I had the drone up, she had 3 tiger sharks on her, right in the shallows, and they had successfully grabbed her, and she had lost one of her front flippers. Right, so the blood's coming out. This turtle is now learning how to swim, missing one of its primary propulsion mechanisms, and she just kept flipping on her side, and these sharks are just going over and over and over, and she keeps flipping over, flipping on her side, flipping on her side. I filmed that for about 45 minutes, and the 3 tiger sharks ended up breaking off. And I go, no, too hard, we can't get her. And it was amazing to see. So she, in terms of reproduction, because it wasn't a rear flipper, it was a front flipper, she could still go nest and lay eggs. If they lose a rear flipper, that's when they're unable to build these egg chambers properly, and you'd see them come up, and it's impossible for them to nest when they're missing a rear flipper. But that injury too, she shut the blood flow down to that area quite quickly as well. So they're pretty robust animals when they need to be.
How long can turtles live, and how big can they get?
It's anywhere 60, maybe even up to 80 years of age. So there's a lot of inherent knowledge in the turtles once they've got to that age as well, knowing what they need to do to survive. And some of those big turtles, they're bigger than a coffee table, and if you have to rescue one, it's at least 4 adults trying to flip these things over or drag them to the beach. Well, I don't know how many turtles I've saved up at Raine Island over the years, but you're trying to save them and they're smacking you in the face with those flippers, and you get them to the edge of the water and off they go. They don't turn around and say thank you, read it, send you an email or anything like that. It's just they're just gone. But they are big animals. I mean, in terms of saving the turtles, if they're still on the beach after about 8:30 in the morning, they're going to cook and die. It's just too hot. And so as part of the programs up at Raine Island, there's ranger teams and traditional owner teams on the island now for pretty well almost half each month during the peak of summer now. And the first job every morning is a team going around rescuing turtles. So if you think about rescuing a turtle up at Raine Island, it's a fit turtle, it's gone all that way, it's got the energy, it's at the peak of reproduction, and so to save one turtle there at the peak of that period would be like the equivalent of rescuing 20 or 50 turtles down, in another part of the reef and another part of the life cycle. So it's really important for us to be getting as many of those saved as possible so they can contribute to the survival of their species.
Yeah, absolutely. With global temperatures heating up, it's good to know there are people helping those turtles get back into the water as quickly as possible before the sun overheats them after an exhausting night of laying eggs. Of course, we know sea turtles survived for millions of years without human assistance, but sadly now, because of humans, they are endangered, and so they do need every bit of help we can give them. And as you mentioned, sea turtles can't nest on the mainland anymore due to problems like feral animals, so the future of their entire population depends on a few tiny islands like Raine Island. Unfortunately, we know that climate change is causing sea level rise on the Great Barrier Reef and is threatening a number of islands, which are critical habitats for endangered animals and also home to First Nations people. We know that Torres Strait Islander people have launched lawsuits against the Australian government asking for stronger climate action, and they're presenting evidence of burial grounds, crops and livelihoods being destroyed by rising sea levels. And one island-dwelling mammal, the Bramble Cay mellimus, went extinct recently, sadly, with the Queensland Government report stating the root cause of its demise was sea level rise on the island where it lived as a result of anthropogenic climate change. So I'm going to be exploring those subjects in later episodes, but I'm just mentioning them now to illustrate that a similar situation does seem to be unfolding on Raine Island. So can you please tell us a bit about when you first noticed that Raine Island was being inundated by the ocean?
When I shot and directed the big BBC series, like 13, 14 years ago, we were up there in December and we're having 5,000 to 6,000 turtles nesting a night. So yeah, it's good numbers. And so then we went back at the end of January, which should have been the peak nesting time, and we should have been seeing at least 500,000 hatchlings coming off the island each night, and we found less than 100. So we thought there's something definitely wrong, and no one had been going to Raine Island after Christmas period to look for the hatchling numbers. The government had been counting adult turtle numbers at the end of November since about 1972. So the sampling was always looking at adult turtle population, not the output. And so when we spent all our time up there in that January-February period, we were there for quite a while and we made some time-lapse films of them. But on the king tides, the king tide was coming up through the entire island and essentially drowning all the nests. So having these time lapses and documenting that there was an issue, we came back and the researcher we were working with, Ian Bell, highlighted to the government, this island is non-functional. There's no babies coming off essentially. And that kicked off the Raine Island Restoration Program, which we were involved with from the beginning. I spent many, many months up there each year documenting that project, which was coordinated by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation with money from BHP and involved the traditional owners, National Parks Wildlife, other agencies. And essentially the decision was made to terraform the island and take excavation gear up there and essentially take 7 meters of beach sand and dump it up onto the sand dunes to make the average height of the sand higher and outside of that drowning zone. The restoration program was the first of its kind for the Great Barrier Reef. Even Attenborough wasn't allowed on it with the BBC for Blue Planet when they did it all those years ago, because it was so highly protected that no one was allowed to go there unless you're a scientist, which I was lucky to be going there. And then you had what was the most protected island on Great Barrier Reef become the most manipulated island on the Great Barrier Reef in terms of earth moving gear. Let's move all the sand around. There's monitoring equipment all over the island. There's poles and cameras everywhere. You look at the island now, and as a filmmaker, when you try and get a shot of turtles on the beach without some scientific device in the background, it's impossible. So it's gone from one extreme to another. That did increase nesting success and hatchling success up there. But the issue is that the island itself has been non-functional for probably 30 years. And so if there's been no babies coming off there for 30 years, at some stage we're going to see a drop in the population of adult turtles nesting. And unfortunately, that's what we're starting to see now. So in the last 5-6 years, there's been one good season where there was still a couple of thousand turtles nesting. But all the other years, including summer we just passed, the peak numbers of nesting turtles was less than 200. So it was inevitable we were going to see a crash in the population. So we are seeing that now. Unfortunately, we're not going to see the results of manipulating the island and increasing the success of hatchling rates for probably another 20 or 30 years, because it takes 30 years for these turtles to mature to be big enough to nest. And if you think about it, those poor little guys out there now are just dealing with so much more issues, microplastics out in the plankton where they're feeding in those early years, climate change, weather issues and everything. So tough time to be a turtle. And it's pretty depressing. And we find that more and more for a lot of the stuff we film. Like, we're talking to the broadcasters all the time, all the streamers, and they want it bigger and better than it's ever been done before. And you're telling them, well, that will never happen again. And they're like, what? No, we want more. We want bigger numbers. I go, it's over. And I've had some pretty stark conversations in the last couple of months with the broadcasters, for some big upcoming series, or your Blue Planets, all that kind of stuff. You go, that's not going to happen ever again. That's not going to happen ever again. That's not happening ever again. So climate change is really affecting our business right now, really badly.
I am so sorry to hear that. That's just another example of why we need our leaders to take much more urgent action on climate change, because lives and livelihoods depend on it, and we just can't afford to be delaying any longer. And the other big problem for turtles with climate change, of course, is that the summer nesting season is now getting so hot, and we're having such extreme heat waves that the sand is getting heated up, and it's impacting on the turtle eggs when they're in the sand. So can you tell us a bit about the impacts you're seeing from that?
We have what's now called feminisation of the entire northern population of the Great Barrier Reef. So when they're developing in the sand, it's the temperature of the sand that determines the sex of the turtles. And what happens now is that Raine Island, for those turtles that are nesting there, is that 100% of them are female. We're running out of males in the far north, which is a big issue. Whereas you go to the far south of the Great Barrier Reef, and we're working a lot down in the Capricorn Bunkers at the moment. So Northwest Island is probably the next biggest nesting site. And we've been down there, I've had the drone up, and you're seeing multiple males, mating with females there and stuff like that, that's pretty cool to see, because, the year before last when I was up at Raine, I was pretty well swimming the entire reef every day, and there were 2 males in that whole area. The females can mate before they come out and do their migration and store sperm from where they're coming from, but a lot of the green turtles from Raine, when they leave, the females are heading back up north into the Gulf, into the Torres Strait areas, all those seagrass beds up there, and that's where they're feeding upon. So that's where there's a big lack of males at the moment.
Yeah, we're very lucky that diving and snorkeling near Cairns, we have so many sea turtles, especially green sea turtles and hawksbills. We can usually see at least 1 turtle, if not more, every single day. So it's a big draw card for the tourists. So it seems like, there's a never-ending supply of turtles out there, but you're right that most of the turtles we see are female, which you can recognise because they've got a way smaller tail. It makes me really sad if I think that my children or, younger generations won't be able to dive in and see turtles every day, potentially. But there are things we can all do to help and contribute. So what would you like to see being done?
One, pie in the sky idea is maybe we need to be building islands in different areas that then have manipulated shade, manipulated temperature, so we can give these animals another chance. So there's a lot of ideas being thrown out there, and I think the future of marine ecosystems and the survival for the next 200 years or so, until our temperature regime starts coming down again by the planet becoming carbon neutral, and every day we waste, it's just going to be harder and longer, is we may need to be doing these massive manipulations of the marine ecosystem to act as a bank for all species into the future.
Yeah, and as you've already mentioned, when you think about the cost, the amount of people, which is often volunteers, and just the resources required for all of these interventions, it's just another motivation to go a lot faster with reducing carbon emissions and protecting the species in the first place, right?
Oh, definitely. We should have been doing something 20 years ago. And cyclones, the weather events, the cost is becoming personal to people now with extreme weather, whether it's insurance policies or, flooded properties like in Cairns, everything like that. I think we're at the point where, because it is costing people a personal cost now, it's a whole different mindset on climate change. So it's one of those things where, if you watch disaster movies, when humanity is right on the brink, hopefully we get together and get something done. And it's a good, well, it's not good, but it is, for something for us to promote, going, look, we are now seeing the effects of humanity and climate change on this planet, and here it is, the green sea turtle. what do you want to go next? We're seeing that now. What's next? The polar bear? In their demise, maybe they can be really good ambassadors.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to the point where the only way people can see a sea turtle is by watching one of your videos. Luckily, we're not at that point yet, and there's still a lot we can do. But I just want to acknowledge again the role that Indigenous rangers play in helping to protect the turtles. You mentioned it earlier, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that the way traditional owners have interacted with the turtle population was sustainable up until, Western industrialization came to threaten the turtle population. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was sustainable use by traditional owners, and it's just when you have the impacts of Western civilization and now climate change impacted on the overall turtle population. And, the traditional owners now, in areas where they still take for traditional use, everyone's very mindful of the turtle numbers. Some groups opt not to do it, until populations are better. So you do see the biggest protectors of the turtle up and down our coast are our traditional owners.
Luckily, we still currently have a really good population of sea turtles on the Great Barrier Reef. So if there are any listeners who would like to see and swim with sea turtles, how do you recommend they go about it? And also, if people are interested in witnessing turtle hatching, which is taking place currently, not just on Raine Island, but in a few places across the reef, and will be continuing for a little while yet, where can people go to witness turtle hatching?
Yeah, I mean, to swim with turtles, there's some great locations off Cairns, where there's some friendly ones hanging around, particularly Moore Reef and some of the other reefs out there. I know there are turtles that like to photobomb quite regularly. But to see the life cycle of a turtle, the nesting and all that kind of stuff, the southern reef, Raine Island and Lady Elliot Island, I grew up down the southern end of the reef. And the turtles are doing quite well in the southern end of the reef because it is cooler. They're not having many of the issues as what we are up at Raine. So you can still see a couple hundred a night nesting there. And to think that you can take kids, be walking to the beach and they'll have researchers out with the headlamps there that are doing the turtle counts, that talk to the public about them. And then at sunset, you just sit there and you just wait and you look, and then you'll see someone start yelling hatchlings, and you just run to that spot and see all these little wind-up toys going into the ocean. It is magic. So it's great to know that there are two places that public can get easy access to, and that's Lady Elliot and Raine Island.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time talking with us about turtles and the Raine Island Restoration Project. If people want to find out more about you or your company or your research and about Raine Island or anything like that, where can they look?
Yeah, we do all that social media stuff. So if you want to know about our research, it's on Biopixel Oceans, which is our research foundation, and all the filmmaking work we do is under Biopixel. And with the turtles from the Turtle Hospital here, when they get released, they've often got a satellite tracker on them. And if you go to our Biopixel Oceans page, you can click on the bio tracker and actually follow where these turtles go once they're released again.
Awesome. Richard Fitzpatrick, thanks very much for your time today.
Not a problem.
I hope you enjoyed your journey to Raine Island with Word on the Reef today. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to this series and follow Word on the Reef on Instagram to get notified when it's time for our next adventure. This is a not-for-profit passion project, so if you enjoyed it, please write a review, share, and tell your friends. If you'd like to get involved in action to help protect the Great Barrier Reef, visit www.fightforourreef.org.au. There are some petitions there you can sign to ask our leaders for strong climate action to help protect our reef and its sea turtles. If you'd like to sponsor this podcast, please consider becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month over at patreon.com/wordonthereefpodcast. You'll get a shout out and the proceeds will help towards covering costs like podcast hosting, email hosting, editing software subscriptions, and so on. That's all for now. Best fishes, and see you next time.